Hi, welcome back to the 40-day challenge and embracing the race. As you can see, I am back home in Georgia. Got home yesterday and still trying to keep a little bit of Disney magic with my earrings there. Today for day 5 is called Time to Sprint. This one was, when I first read the title, I was like, wait a minute, weren't we just talking about a couple of days ago running and walking? Why are we talking about sprinting now? But it's actually really good. The verse that she shares at the beginning is 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. So she opens this one with a story, and a story a lot of us runners probably have, to be quite honest. She was running, enjoying her time. It was beautiful weather. And then all of a sudden she hears something and sees a rush of fur, and she's getting chased by a dog. Now, for the record, I'd always read that running just increases the dog's, chase instinct. But that's what she did, is she sprinted. Unfortunately, she outran the dog. She sprinted and got away from the dog, and she just kept sprinting. I think she said for about half a mile before she realized the dog was no longer behind her. But I think that's a situation that a lot of us runners can relate to, is getting chased by dogs. And she says in here, if you've never faced the threat of a loose dog, your chances are pretty good. If you're planning on making running a habit, your chances are pretty good that it'll happen one day. Besides loose dogs on the run, what else drives us to abandon our rhythmic pace and flee? An unexpected thunderstorm? Yeah. A stalker? Perhaps something else has demanded your sudden need to sprint. Whatever it is, in these situations, we've got to flee. And she brings it around to talk about what the Bible tells us that we should be fleeing from. We are called to flee the evil desires of youth, that's in 2 Timothy, the love of money, that's in 1 Timothy, and idolatry, it talks about that in 1 Corinthians, and sexual immorality, it talks about that also in 1 Corinthians. And in each of those cases, it tells us to flee from those things. The definition of flee is to take flight, retreat, escape, bolt, seek safety through flight, or run away from. So that's how she's relating this particular lesson that she learned to our walk, is things that we should be aware of in our life and flee from. You'll hear different strategies on rushing dogs, but in regards to prevention, veteran runners agree on this. Know your route and avoid streets where you know loose dogs could pose a threat. Just as runners take precautions in avoiding potentially dangerous situations, we can apply the same strategy in the area of temptation. Remember, this is a really good statement that I like. Remember that temptation is not a sin. We're human. We're all going to have that. That's not the sin. But our response to it can lead to sin if we're not careful. And I think that's a really good statement, a very important one. When I got to this point in this devotion, I wrote over here off to the side that one of my biggest temptations is distraction, and I'll get more into that in a second. But I also underlined in here that Satan looks for a weak moment. And I think it's going to be different for everybody, but we all have something that will have a weak moment where that temptation is going to get to us. And that's what her point is, and that's the moment that we need to have that fight or flight thing happening, that flee moment. Okay, so the questions, and this is where I'll get back to the distraction thing that I wrote on the side. Identify a recent time when temptation caught you off guard, and what was your response? Something that happens for me quite a bit. My biggest thing is distraction. I think about it a lot, especially like if I'm in a small group setting or watching something faith related on TV where I need to be paying attention to learning, or if I'm in church. I am very easily distracted. And even just in daily life, distractions will get me. Like I probably have already mentioned it in the first 4 days, when it comes to reading or the quiet time aspect of a faith walk, is getting distracted by other things I'm doing, other chores, other errands, or even just not even things that are also important like chores or errands, but like watching a movie or even running. All of these things could distract from the important things. And then I got to thinking about, back in that list that was earlier in the devotion that the Bible calls us to flee from, one of them was idolatry. And I know that a lot of pastors will talk about this, that a lot of people read idolatry and think, oh, it's worshiping another god or an object. And it can actually be, it is that, but if you really think about it, it's very, very easy to fall into that. And I know I have. Not worshiping another god, but putting something before him. That's idolatry. And I looked up a definition. And the first definition that comes up of idolatry, I got my computer here, is the worship of idols. But then another definition of it is extreme admiration, love, or reverence for something or someone. And so, and I completely believe it's true. When I've heard pastors do messages on this, that anything can be an idol if it's something you're putting before God, and it can be running, it can be watching TV, it can even be your husband or wife or boyfriend, girlfriend, anything that you are putting before God or what God would want you to do. Like if you're dating in a relationship and you're not making the best relational choices as far as the fact that you're just dating, that is putting that relationship before God, And I did that, I will be the first to admit that I had relationships growing up that weren't what God wanted me to have. And so distractions and things like that, putting things before, is where I struggle in that aspect. Anything, and there are things that sometimes get in the way, and that's idolatry right there. Is there a current situation in your life causing you to feel tempted? What next step can you take to stay on a safer path? Really, for me, this goes back to making sure that I do things like this and, do my quiet time in the morning, before distractions have a chance to get in the way. And it almost sounds like that's really an easy way out. But I also like to think that doing it in the morning, that's the first thing I'm putting into my brain and into my heart, And it really does help throughout the day. I've got whatever word I've read that morning right there in the forefront. And it helps deal with other things that happen through the day and my actions and reactions to anything that might be going on. Is it harder for you to avoid temptation or escape sin in the moment? It used to be. And that's where staying in his word really helps. And knowing in advance, at least for some things that that could come up. Like I know that growing up, and I've taught this to my stepdaughter, and this was taught to me growing up, specifically talking about those dating relationships, at least for my first serious relationship I had, where I didn't make the best choices. I didn't know in advance what my line was going to be. So if you read his word and you know what it says and you know in advance what your action should be in any situation, whether dating or with coworkers that are hard to work with, or a boss that's hard to work with, or friends, or just anything, any human situation, if you know in advance what the word says, it helps when you get to that moment. but it can be hard. And I can be an anxious person, and those are probably the moments where it's what am I trying to say? Those are the moments where I don't always make the best decisions right away. I get my temper gets short, and things like that, and that probably is where it's hardest for me. I react too quickly without stepping back and thinking, okay, this may be a worrisome moment, this may be causing me anxiety, but I have a hope in something that's bigger. So this was a pretty good one. Weak moments, we're all human, and I am the first to admit that I am so far from perfect. But it definitely can be hard, especially when one of my biggest things is worry. And when COVID first happened, I had absolutely no idea what was going on. But I found my ways to deal with that anxiety, and just remember that He is so much bigger than anything that ever happens here. And there's a plan for everything that I won't understand. And I love when people say this, because it's so true, that I won't understand this side of heaven. When I get to that other side, everything will make sense. I love the analogy of a big tapestry. I'm only seeing one thread. Once I get to heaven, I'm going to see this whole beautiful tapestry and how everything played a role to get to that. So that's our day 5, embracing the race. So I hope everybody is doing really good, and I will see you tomorrow for day 6. So we'll see you then.